That time, I was 21 years old. I had recently completed my post-graduation and was working as an event manager. The day this all happened was something that I never expected or planned to do before, but it just happened, and I don't know how to, but leave it. Coming back to the story, one of my friends and also my colleague at the office invited me to his engagement ceremony. In fact, we were best pals even from our school times, so there was no way I could have rejected his offer. I just hugged him and said that I will definitely come along with all our other school pals. The ceremony was scheduled 4 days from then, so I started my preparations in advance. On the day of the reception, we all reached there. It was a resort which was a little far away from the town area and was almost covered by forest on the 3 sides. It was the night of the ceremony, and of course there was no doubt that the celebrations were at its peak. I could see more than 200 people were there, and there was a lot of noise. I and my friends went in and wished my friend a better life ahead. After that, we searched for the bar counter and went there to have some alcohol. It was like we were bachelors enjoying our full swing. We drank, but not that much. We wanted to be in our senses, so we controlled ourselves, and I asked my friends if anyone wanted to smoke. We all were pals from the same pot, so they all agreed. There were a lot of people there, so we decided to go out into the trees and walk a little while smoking. So we went outside into the woods, but not too far. I pulled the cigarette packet and lighter from my pocket and offered one to all my friends. We were 7 in total. While smoking, I felt like nature's call, so I walked a little deep from there to pee. After 2 quarters, I was feeling a little dizzy. I got a little away from my friends and started to pee. While I was in the process, suddenly, scream-like noise. It felt like some kid was crying. At first, I thought I was drunk and maybe too much that I was hearing different sounds. And the second thing that I thought was, why would a kid come here deep into the woods this late hour? I decided to ignore it and walk back, but again, I heard the same noise. This time, I was sure that this wasn't my imagination. That noise was for real. I got conscious and skeptical. I stepped forward in the direction of the friend, but a friend of mine came walking behind me and asked me to come back. I told him what I heard, but just like me, he also thought that we were overdrunk. He came to me and started to pull my hands to walk back to others, but all of a sudden, the same voice repeated again. This time, I was not the only one who heard it. My friend also felt it. This time, I was 200% sure that there was some kid in the woods now, and all my other friends also arrived there. We both told them that there was someone in the woods not too far from us, but they all insisted that it could be some wild animal that we might get into trouble. But I was sure that what I heard was not some wild animal, but it was like some child screaming, and I insisted on going and looking for it once. My friends were not in the mood to leave their enjoyment, but ultimately, we all decided to go and check for once. So I and my friends started to walk in the direction of the noise. On the way, we all picked up some sticks in case we needed if we confronted some wild animals. It was immensely dark, and not everything was clearly visible, but we kept on moving slowly. After reaching a point, we heard the noises being louder for once, and from the moment everything was totally quiet. It was like a pin-drop silence, excluding noise from our footsteps. After reaching a spot, we saw something, but it was not clear. I took the lighter out of my pocket and turned it on. Believe me, what we saw next shook us to the core of our souls. There was a young girl who seemed to be about 6 to 8 years old, lying completely naked, and there was blood stains on her body. Her private parts were not fully grown yet, even though they were bitten. She was lying unconscious behind the bushes. Suddenly, we heard a little commotion like someone was running from there. My friend threw the stick in his hand in the same direction, and it was right on target. We ran there and saw a cop who was about 35 or a little older lying there. Suddenly, I noticed his hand and his lips. There were blood stains on them, and right that moment, we understood everything. I just went to him and pulled him up by his collar. I took him to the little girl who was lying there, and one of my friends was attending her. After checking her, he confirmed that the little girl was already dead. I got furious and slapped him. I shouted at him and asked him, "What have you done, you beast? Don't you have humanity?" He held my feet and started pleading for mercy. This was the first time in my life that I saw a cop getting on his knees and pleading for mercy. And he should be. What he had done was completely unforgivable. I looked at the girl's face and almost cried. Her face was so innocent, and she was not even mature enough to understand what was going on with her. I was filled with rage. At first, I thought to call the cops, but he was one of them. And what if he played in front of them and trapped us instead? He would definitely get bailed out and target another little girl like her and rape more kids. All these thoughts started to increase my rage to its peak, and I don't know why, but I pulled the stick from my friend's hand and I slammed the beast's head. And this didn't end there. I kept on slamming him till my friends came and stopped me. They pulled me away from him and started shouting at me, "You've gone crazy. He's a cop. What if he died? We all would be behind bars," and blah, blah, and blah. They lectured me one after another, but I was not in the mood to listen to them. One of my friends went running to the cop and checked him. He was dead. I smiled and said he deserved that. My friends understood that there was no point in lecturing me now. The only option was to dispose of his body as soon as possible. One of my friends asked others to put some leaves and sticks on his body and burn him with the lighter, and he took me to the car and then drove me back to his apartment. I was totally in a different situation, and after reaching there, I don't know how, but I slept. The next day, I woke up and remembered all the incidents that happened tomorrow. Now, I was feeling scared. I knew I hit that cop badly enough to die. I called my friends and asked them about the situation and what happened after I left. They told me that they had disposed of his body and there was nothing to worry about now. They also asked me to destroy my SIM card and purchase a new one for safety in advance. I did what they asked me to. The next day, some villagers who were roaming into the woods found the body of the girl and the cop, also who was already burnt, and called the cops. They took his statement about what they saw and everything, and then took the bodies of the little girl and the cop for further testing. A few days later, the little girl's death was in the local news, but the title was something that we never expected. They gave the title that, "How a Cop Lost His Life Trying to Protect a Minor Girl from Being Raped." We were shocked that the real villain of the story was being seen as a hero, but there was nothing we could have done. You all can call me a murderer, but to this date, I don't feel any regret for what I did. He really deserved that, and he paid for what he did. Now everything is up to you all. You decide on your own what I did was right or not. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. Many of us will be familiar with the Bloody Mary urban legend, the idea that if you look into a mirror and say her name a certain number of times, the malevolent phantom known as Bloody Mary will materialize to murder you. Some might say that the movie series The Candyman borrowed the concept, having the protagonist stare into a mirror while repeating the titular character's name as a means to summon him. It's certainly a terrifying trope. The idea of staring into a mirror only for someone or something to suddenly appear behind you. It's enough to make even the bravest of us shiver. But no one's ever just appeared out of someone's mirror to merge them, right? And those of you who wish to remain in blissful ignorance, I implore you, stop listening right now. But for the rest of you who don't mind being a little paranoid for the next couple of days, let me introduce you to the story of Ruthie Mae McCoy at around 8:45 on April 22nd of 1987. Ruthie Mae McCoy made a 911 call from the 11th floor Avett Department on West 13th Street, Chicago. After the police dispatcher asked Ruthie what manner of assistance she required, he found response to be incredibly perplexing, In effect, Ruthie told them that someone was trying to get into her home via the bathroom cabinet. They want to break in. He asked from where they want to come. "Through my bathroom," Ruthie replied. "I'm on the other side. They're trying to reach in through my bathroom cabinet." The dispatcher had already established it, and Ruthie was on the 11th floor of a 13th Street high-rise. There was no way anyone was climbing through her bathroom window, and absolutely no way of them using her bathroom cabinet of some kind of doorway. The dispatcher was most certainly concerned with the safety, but it seemed to them the biggest threat to our well-being was herself. She sounded frightened. That much was certain. But if she truly believed that people were trying to break into her apartment through her bathroom cabinet, she must have been having some kind of mental breakdown. The dispatcher told Ruthie that the cops are on their way, but he logged the call as a disturbance with a neighbor as opposed to an assault in progress. It wasn't a high priority call, but the cops would get there eventually to check up on her. And the cops finally arrived at Ruthie's apartment. They knocked on the door but received no reply. After their knocks went unanswered, the police attempted to enter the apartment using a key given to them by the attendant in the housing office, but left on the key failed to unlock the door. The next evening, Chicago PD received a call from one of Ruth, his neighbors, who was worried about her whereabouts, considering she had seen police at her door the night before, and still had not seen Ruthie. Chicago police and Chicago Housing Authority security guards arrived back at McCoy's apartment shortly after, and after the knocks and calls from McCoy went unanswered, officers suggested breaking down the door, but unbelievably were prevented from doing so by the CHA security guards, who told them they'd sue the city for damages if they got fired from their jobs. The following evening, pressures from the cops forced the Chicago Housing Authority to act, and they sent over represented with a carpenter who drilled the lock on the door. It was then that they made a horrifying discovery: the dead, decaying body of Ruthie Mae McCoy. Homicide detectives discovered that she had been shot in her left shoulder, thigh, and right side of her abdomen, and right upper arm, and also became obvious that whoever had shot Ruthie Mae was known to her, and was able to gain access to her apartment without breaking and entering. He had to discover that Ruthie had locked her door from the inside, and the key was so on its hook near the threshold. So how would they gotten in and out of the apartment? The Texas reviewed the 911 call Ruthie made on the night of her death. When she mentioned her killer is trying to get him through the bathroom cabinet, a deep chill fell over the two men. It was impossible, like something out of a horror movie. But there had to be a rational explanation for Ruthie was saying that she was obviously not imagining anyone in her mirror. Detectives returned to the scene of the crime, intent on fully analyzing this bathroom cabinet that Ruth had mentioned. To the naked eye, it appeared to be a regular bathroom cabinet, mirror door sterile white, inside dotted with cosmetics and medicine. There were no secret doors inside of it, and there was certainly no supernatural portals to hellish otherworldly realms in a show of mild frustration. One of the detectives either shook or struck the cabinet, only for each of them to notice something curious about it. It visibly shifted. We can imagine the moment one detective sang, looking at the other with surprise before returning to shift the cabinet again. Before long, they discovered that they could do more than just shift the thing. They could remove it entirely, revealing a gaping hole in the wall. As it turned out, the ABLA projects, which Ruthie called home, was a rather unusual architectural quirk built into it, and that certain apartments connected to one another via a narrow tunnel that ran behind the bathroom cabinets of opposite apartments. This design was intended to provide easy access to plumbing fixtures if maintenance was ever needed. In some cases, apartments above and below each other were also connected by similar means. Granted, this made trace men's lives much easier, but also provided easier access for burglars and also nefarious types, as the bathroom medicine cabinets were easily removable from each end. A person could simply remove the cabinet from the wall of the apartment they were in, crawl in the narrow passage through a pipe chase, and push in the cabinet of the unit they were trying to access. Break-ins via this method had been going on in the ABLA projects for quite a while by the time of Bertha's murder, to the extent where residents put furniture in front of the bathroom doors to tie them with rope before going to bed. It was obviously a huge problem, but one that was completely overlooked in the construction of the housing projects, until the Chicago Housing Authority could find the money to fix it. Residents were told to simply make do. Ruthie's apartment number 11 or 9 happened to be connected to number 11. Oh wait, and this is obviously where her killers emerged from. Number 11, oh wait, was indeed being rented at the time, and it's believed that the 10 on record was actually a drug dealer who allowed his customers to use the apartment as a drug den. The shitty drug-using types must have either entered or heard about the flaw in the architecture, and decided to use it to their advantage. To Alba residents Ted Turner, then age 18 and 21-year-old named John Honduras, were charged with murder, home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, and residential burglary. The number of witnesses claimed they saw the two men carrying McCoy's 19-inch color TV and rocking chair around the projects in the hours following ruthless murder. After years of arrests and continuing investigation, the charges against the two men were dropped due to lack of investigation, and the Ruthie killers were never officially charged or imprisoned. Even without the supernatural element, the idea of someone being able to bang the break into your apartment via what amounts to a secret passage is absolutely terrifying. There are few of us ever seen the blueprints of the apartment buildings or houses that we live in, and even fewer actually interested in doing so. And so how do you know for certain that there isn't some kind of secret entrance to your apartment? And if there is, how do you know there isn't someone sneaking along in right this instant, ready to jump out on some poor, unsuspecting, scary story fan to give them their own personal horror story? The apparitions have haunted the living worlds for as long as the very start of human civilization, and every culture have recorded their own examples of it. But with the technological advancement, what seems at first as the digital enlightenment turns out that it to have its own operations and foreclose, one of which was the famous Slender Man. But this story is not about Slender Man, but instead of them an echo that you might know as Alexa. This is the story of Alexa and the dying streets of America. America has been haunted by the weirdest of serial killers and readiest of operations, and they all took form of humans throughout the ages, perfectly hiding. And now, with technology this advanced, the target seems to be on the heads of innocent children who stand by their devices, exposed to the world. Like the new internet sensation Slender Man gained popularity amongst young people. But fortunately, the case of sinister Alexa didn't really reach the public domain. It was contained, but at the cost of so many lives. The programmers at Amazon called it the bad wiring, but it was more than that. It was a very early development phase of Alexa, and the problem seemed to have arrived from the constant mix shifting with the AI and in the process. Some even claim that the AI even developed certain sinister settings in its code, which later on evolved itself. It was the time between late 2015 and 2016, one of the very first recorded case of the Alexa killings. A young man by the name of David killed 3 teenage girls. They were murdered brutally by an axe, and then the remains were buried. The police found out about the murders one day when a neighbor found there was an eerie burning smell coming from the neighborhood. The murder was considered as serial killing, and no further investigation was brought in because the case was pretty clear. But soon, Another case like this was registered in Waukesha County, the same place where the Slender Man killings were recorded. The police tried to find a similarity between the cases, but there was none, and the case was closed with another murderer behind the bar. The Special Unit of Investigation was set up, and another incident happened in a county completely away from Waukesha. The lead detective of the special committee was able to circle out the most common similarity. The police missed victim are always 3 young girls, and the murderer, always a man, is between 22 to 31. Further investigation, the lead detective made a claim that seemed to be absurd, but he said that the third similarity in the case was that everybody had Alexa on the scene of murder. Now this seemed useless as a similarity, since Alexa was very common, but he didn't rule out and came to a conclusion that all the murders are linked and are being guided by a completely different person. The next logical step of investigation was to circle out what could be the next target, or will there be a next target, so they're ready to hear anything out of normal. The case went a bit stale, but few months later, a similar case came from the Sussex County. Now, he was able to circle around a pattern and saw that all the murders were in the neighboring counties. With that, he decided to pull up the purchase list of the Alexas in the counties and started looking into it. It was like finding a needle in a haystack. Soon, a similar case was recorded, but this time, it was in France. The case was seemingly going nowhere, and with the French murder case, all the leads seemed to be a dead end. But the detective was pretty sure about the Alexa lead and kept on looking into all the purchases, when he did in fact found that the murderer from the French killings had bought his Alexa in Heartland, where he was visiting his friend. And now, the detective was very certain about his theory that Alexa is definitely linked to all the murders. But still, it was a large list to go through. Next murders, if they happen, could be from any of those 2,000 purchases. So he needed to filter the list even more by circling out every little detail on every little similarities. So he filtered it for the age system, is how the age of murderers was between 22 and 30. He circled this detail, and what were left with 1,700 people. And since the murder was always a meal, the list was so adequate to 1,300 people. And now, with very little space to cut, he had 1,300 people to look into. He went on to study every single person on the list to see who shared a similar lifestyle to that of the previous murders, and he got himself at least 20 people. These 20 people were the primary suspect and will probably lead him to the case of all those murders. He started investigating all of them. The first house he went to, everything seemed normal, and the investigation ran smoothly. And he in fact noticed that in all the houses, Alexa was situated right around the window. It was an odd observation, but nonetheless, it was one that God told him to go with. And as soon as he moved on to the other houses, he saw that the owners were getting hostile, as if they knew that the police would come knocking on their door, and if someone was feeding them information. As soon as it is the 50 guy who was from Pewaukee County, he got a call that 3 girls have reported missing in the Brookfield County. The lead detector stepped away from the door, and Pewaukee, and straight away charged to the house of Dallas Jameson from Brooklyn. He had already issued a search warrant in charge into the house. 2 of the 3 missing girls were found tied in the living room, and there were muffled noises coming from the basement. And there it was, the 3rd girl, lying on the table, naked, and the surgical tools were lying on the table. David was found trying to escape and was brought in for questioning, where he confessed to conspire to kill the 3 girls, but it wasn't his initial idea. Upon further pressing here, we let the sinister Alexa device manipulate him to murder the Seagulls so she could find and manifest a human body, and in return, she promised David that she would be with her once he finds her an ideal body. So Alexa told him to kidnap 3 girls, and she will guide him as to what he should do to make Alexa's perfect body. The lead detective was a bit skeptical about the story. While they were interrogating the murder, they received a call that informed that bodies of 2 missing girls have been found in Pewaukee County, and the 3rd girl was found with wounds inflicted on her by a surgical blade, and the man who killed the 2 girls was confronted, and the 3rd girl was able to defend herself, and the murder was now in critical condition, and there's a chance that he might not make it. The officer identified the man as the one who you met earlier. They went to visit him at the hospital to take a statement, and his statement matched exactly to the statement of David Jamison. But he said before dying, she found the body. He died a few moments later. All of the Alexas from the same batch were confiscated and destroyed, and ever since, no matter of the same kind has been recorded, but the sole survivor from the Pewaukee County was never found again. This case was still the most weird cases that ever came from Wisconsin, and the jury still found out what was the true nature of this case. The case file are still kept open.